Let me start with, what do I do? And I smile because all of us get asked that question a lot. Well, what do you do? And I just simply tell people, I'm a printer. And I stop right there. And they have this strange look on their face, and in most cases, look for ink under the fingernails, and then walk away and don't pursue it. But those that do, I get a chance to talk a little bit about, well, it's not just all ink on paper. It's a diversified communications company, and get into the more complexities of Taylor. But it gives me a great chance to talk about Taylor, and what a great year to do that as we celebrate our 50th year anniversary under our founder, Glen Taylor. So it makes for an interesting conversation. So it can either last about an hour or about 5 seconds. I come from a family of 10, and that usually also raises eyebrows. 7 boys, 3 girls, mom and dad. It's a great way to grow up. Think about the competitiveness, think about the need to share, think about how important it is to think of each other and take care of each other. I mean, if you're a small family, that might not be as critical a need as it is when there are all 10. And we lived under one roof for about a year with all 10 under that roof. And so you got to be a little bit organized as to who goes first and who goes second and how does everybody get fed. But there's an awfully tight bond that develops. One of the disciplines, for example, that my father was just absolutely insistent upon is that we all ate dinner together. And as we were growing up and schedules became more difficult to manage, that was one absolute that he wouldn't budge from. And most of the time, he sat at the end of the table and we all ate dinner together. And it's just a classic family of 10. And it's how we got so close and so friendly, and why we treasure those moments when we get back together again. I sit here today and I can't imagine growing up without them. And they still remain such an important part of my life. There's not a week goes by that I don't at least talk to one of them. So, love is also friendship, and what a terrific source of friendship. And I just couldn't be more thankful that I came from a healthy Catholic family where big families were kind of the state of the norm, and I think that's the one thing that resonates with me the most. Today, we have 9 of us still walking the earth. Mother and father deceased, but one brother succumbed to a substance addiction problem, and otherwise we're all very healthy and happy, and we're going to have a little reunion next week, so we try to do everything we can to stay close. One of the things we do as a family right now, we go to the Big Ten Wrestling Championship every year. And so wrestling has just been a part of my life and a part of my family. My dad was the disciplinarian of the family, and you can see by the dinner conversation, he ruled the roost. It felt like with a family of 10, probably needed to be more rigid than he may have been with a smaller family, but there were no breaks. And there's plenty of stories where it was not a very friendly place to be around, but usually we did something wrong. I remember one specific instance where he's at a neighbor's house talking to the neighbor. My brother was grounded, and the next thing he sees is the grounded brother driving the car down the street. And let me tell you, there was a heck to pay for that. He's a manufacturing guy. So I learned a lot about business from my dad. Really a loving person when you cut through the first layers of the onion, so to speak. And the older you got, the more the friendship and camaraderie part of it developed. And in later life, we were truly best of friends. And ultimately, at the latter part of his life, he was afflicted with Alzheimer's. The story I remember probably that I cherished the most about my dad, again, that organized, disciplined approach. He, when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, was insistent that he tell all of us individually. And I remember the exact moment when we're riding in the car and he starts to explain, what the doctor's appointment revealed. And, there began a 10-year, from 77 to 87, 10-year period of time where we watched him progress through Alzheimer's. And it's the most prominent in my mind, not because it was the latest 10 years, but because you could watch all the dynamics of first wanting to be very proactive with it, then really struggling as he felt it progress. The most painful period was the middle period where he knew there were things he couldn't remember. It was frustrating. He would go to the grocery store and we'd have to go get him to bring him back, things like that. That was the hardest part. And then as it progressed even further and he needed to get into a care facility that was skilled at taking care of that affliction, it became easier from the standpoint that there was no frustration and we were in the final stages. And I remember visiting him there quite often and just going out for a walk. I'm sure he didn't know who I was, but to me he was still Dad, and it was just taking care of him all the way to the end. And the most peaceful part of it was he simply went to sleep one night and we got a telephone call that he didn't wake up, and if there's a way to go, that's not a bad way to go. The most curious part about that period of time was trying to figure out what is actually going on inside his head. It is obvious he believes he's with strangers, but not entirely. So even my mother would say, I think he knew it was me. He just didn't act like it was me. So that is really hard. That is really hard. The way you overcome that, and like you say, the inspiration of it is you look at him and he's still Dad. And you take comfort from the fact that you may not know who I am. You may not have that love and passion that was once there overtly, but I know you're still Dad and I still love you, and that's how you get by this time period. Mom was the exact opposite of Dad. So we always have very fond memories of Mom. Mom knew that life was hard. Life was hard with 10 kids. Life was hard from a budgetary standpoint. She couldn't say yes to everything, but she used every ounce of effort to make sure she overcame some of those financial and just sheer numbers limitations. She was my coach and trainer all the way through high school. I look back on those days as a high school wrestler. She would time me at 5 in the morning when I'd go out for my morning run. She never missed a match. My dad tried to make as many as he could, as he did with all the events the kids participated in. But my mother was there for everyone, and she had criticism and consolation after every event. So ever present, ever present. I mean, each morning as we got ready to go to school, where was she? Downstairs early in the morning, organizing the mad pack that was picking up their lunch boxes and heading off to school. She knew what she had to do with such a large family and how to make sure every one of us felt like we had a loving, caring mother. And she did it effortlessly because it came genuinely from the heart. And that's what I admired the most, is that nobody felt shrift. Everybody felt like they were special to her. And that's hard to do. It's hard to do when there's 10 kids in the family. Now, the kids would always argue, the younger sister got more than the first born, but as adults, I think we're all amazed. How did she pull this off? So that's probably the thing that stands out the most. My mother tried to never complain. I don't remember her growing up saying, I've got this ailment or that ailment. So she was mom, and she thought of us before she thought of herself. And when she got in later life, she developed cancer. And that is just an affliction that, isn't obvious at first, and then it starts to take over the body. And we knew that at one time, as it had progressed, that this was probably going to be what takes her. I've got to hand it to members of the family. I think of my younger brother, I think of my oldest sister, who just have this caretaking provider attribute about them. And in many of those years, she lived next to my younger brother in later life, next to my oldest sister, and in both cases, they took care of her literally on a daily basis. Since in the early years, it was with both mom and dad, and in the later years, with mom, after dad had been transitioned into an Alzheimer care facility. So well taken care of right to the end, and she was, my sister, by her side all the way to the end. So, it's sad to talk about it from the standpoint of we lost our mother, but actually I'm quite fond of telling the story about how particular members of the family just took such great care of her, and she died a happy woman. Well, the one thing that comes to mind when I think of what are the best of times with my mother and father and me as an adult, and most of our brothers and sisters, obviously, as adults and starting their own family, was when we went off to Wisconsin Dells as a complete family to celebrate my mother and father's 50th anniversary as a married couple, and a renewal of their vows. I would have never guessed that they would want to renew their vows after 50 years of marriage, because it was just a given that they were always going to be together, whether it was 30, 40, 50, or 100. And but boy, they really wanted to do that. And once we knew they wanted to do that, we put a great show together. And because I lived in Wisconsin, I was the organizer of that 50th anniversary in Wisconsin Dells. And it was so special. I mean, so special to see them go through their vows. I mean, actually, it was a chance for us to look back 50 years and to see that, yes, they're older in life, later in life, but still have that same love and compassion for each other as they did when they got married the first time. So it's a really special time, and we share the pictures of that often, and I'm proud of them actually for wanting to do that. When I look back at my high school years, there's a couple of things that really were a product of the family in which you were raised, and that is your competitiveness shows through. It shows through in a couple of ways. If you're participating in sport, and in my case wrestling, you wanted to do it just absolutely as well as you could possibly do, and grades as well. Now, that was always a battle, but my mother was there for that as well, homework and the like, but when you think about what are the things that I thought of as I went through high school, it's, how successful can I be while at the same time have a little fun, enjoy the friendships developed, and just make it an experience that you could look back on and say, those were pretty good days. As I was thinking about going to college, the one attribute we haven't mentioned about my father is being in manufacturing. He changed jobs a little bit. Therefore, we never got too comfortable in one place. We would have stretches of 7 years, but usually that was the long end of anyone's stay. So when I was in high school, that was in Ohio. And I got thinking about Ohio colleges and scholarships, if there were any. I was no Division I wrestler by any means, but I did get a partial wrestling scholarship at a college in Zanesville, Ohio, and I thought, well, let's think about that. At the same time, my father is changing jobs from a job in Ohio to a job in Wisconsin. Needless to say, one would have been out of state, and Wisconsin now becomes in-state. With budgetary limitations, I had to quickly change my strategy to a Wisconsin-based school. So I first looked at the University of Wisconsin, and it was just massive, and I thought, I'm going to drown here. And then stumbled upon UW-Whitewater, which also had a very notable wrestling program. No scholarship available, but I thought I'd give it a try. So I went to UW-Whitewater, commuted from the house for the first year, wrestled that year, realized I have a choice to make. I could either go to college for an education or I could go to college for an athletic career, and I wasn't good enough for the latter, so I got out of wrestling starting in my sophomore year and focused on what I wanted to do once I got out of college. And at that time, it was politics and pre-law. My oldest brother was a lawyer, is a lawyer, and I wanted to be a lawyer. And one of the reasons why is he took me under his wing, and I spent a week in Akron, Ohio, as he was a defense attorney for a client accused of murdering a child. And you could put that show on any Law and Order, and it would have hit all the marks. It was absolutely one of the most exciting weeks of my life, and it went from morning all the way through the day and into the night with the research and trying to get to key witnesses. We did a stakeout one night. I mean, the whole thing was full of drama. And then the verdict on the Friday. So it starts on Monday, verdict on Friday. Unfortunately, it did not go my brother's way, which was also a learning experience. To make a long story short, that was a career I just had to get into. And so I pursued that pre-law political science major, and I got about 3/4 of the way through and realized time to start preparing for the LSAT test. Took an accounting course, and there were two types of courses you could take. You could take an accounting course for accountants, or you could take an accounting course for non-accountants. I thought, I didn't even like the word non-accountant. So I took the harder accounting course for accountants and fell in love with it, and ultimately made a sharp right turn and said, maybe there's a lot of lawyers out there and that could be a tough road to hoe. I love accounting. It's probably a less crowded field. Politics, you can worry about that later. So all of a sudden, here I am taking one accounting course after another. The most exciting part of that was still pre-law and political science. So I knew that I had gone too far to change to an accounting major unless I wanted to extend my undergraduate term. And instead, what I decided to do was go ahead and graduate and finish the accounting curriculum in an MBA program. That was the strategy. So I had to take a night course. But the first thing I wanted to do to really get ready for what was now going to be my career is get an internship. And I remember talking to my college professor and saying, hey, how do I sign up for the spring internships? And he looked at me and he said, you're not an accounting major. All of these internships are for accounting majors. I said, I know, but I'm going to be an accounting major. It's going to be in the form of an MBA in accounting. And I've taken enough courses to be able to try it. Is there any reason why I can't just interview and see what happens? He said, I guess not. I ended up interviewing and got a job right there in Madison with a firm called Alexander Grant. So we had the big 8 at that time, big, large 8 public accounting firms. They were the 9th largest accounting firm at the time. They're now called Grant Thornton. And I thought, how perfect is this? I want to ultimately get my MBA in Madison. Whitewater is not that far away. I can commute one day a week to take that final night course. And I would love to get that job. And I was the first non-accounting major to ever get an accounting internship. So again, sometimes luck touches you on the forehead, and here I was. And boy, if I wasn't hooked on accounting before then, I sure was with that internship experience, which was absolutely terrific. But now the hard part came, which is, okay, I got to get accepted at Madison, Wisconsin to UW to complete this whole strategy. And that was a little harder than I thought it was going to be. So took the ACT test now, and and Madison was at the point where the Graduate School of Business was getting tougher and tougher to get into. And I got a letter saying, not quite. Try some other school. And I thought, oh, I gotta keep trying. So somehow I got an appointment with the dean of the Graduate School of Business. I told my story, included a little family, included a real passion for what I wanted to do and why I wanted to go to the University of Wisconsin Graduate School of Business. And he listened, and I could tell just by his body language, I wasn't getting through and I wasn't going to UW. He asked me one last question, and that question was, well, are you going to continue to work for Alexander Grant if you did get accepted at the University of Wisconsin? And initially I thought that was a trick question. I didn't know whether if I said yes, he would say, well, you're going to be distracted and you're never going to perform the way we want you to perform. Or was he asking because he thought that was a really cool thing and that might actually boost my chances? So as always, the truth provides the best answer. And I said, actually, yes. Alexander Grant offered me a role in their tax department, helping prepare tax returns in the spring. And I just braced myself because, again, I didn't know why he had asked the question. And he leaned back in his chair, he took a deep breath, and he said, well, I don't want to keep you from a job, especially a job that's that good. So I'm going to accept you into the University of Wisconsin Graduate School of Business, and I just have one warning for you. You don't ever want to hear from me again. Because if you do, it'll be telling you you need to look for a new Graduate School of Business. And I never sold past that close. I said, thank you very much. I got up. I tried to prevent from skipping out of his office, but those words resonated for the next 2.5 years as I got my graduate degree in accounting. On to Arthur Andersen in Milwaukee, and worked 9 years there. Really split evenly, 4.5 with their financial audit division and 4.5 with a new consulting division that they had just started up. This was at the same time Andersen Consulting was divesting from the organization, and the company wanted to build its own replacement, so consulting within each of the other tax and audit divisions. So I spearheaded the introduction of that service in the Milwaukee office, and first went to the clients I was most comfortable with, and then branched out into other industries. And one of the companies that I did a consulting project for was Fox River Paper Company in Appleton, Wisconsin. So the project lasted about a year. We had a binder full of recommendations for this company that had just gone from a single paper mill company to a diversified 2-mill paper company, with the second mill completely on the opposite side of the world in their mind, the East Coast. And so I got a call from the president, and he said, come on up and let's play a round of golf. He had never asked me to play golf, so I knew something was up. And at the clubhouse on the 19th hole is when he said, look, you left us a lot to do, and we don't have anybody to do it. So here's my proposal. Offered me a job as vice president of administration. It encompassed all of the internal functions, including customer service. So that was what connected me to the customers of Fox River. And a couple of years after I had gotten into this role, the vice president of sales was thinking of retiring, and I started really working more closely with him on the customer connection to what we were doing from a customer service standpoint. And when it got to that point in time, I asked the CEO if I could move into his position. They gave it some thought and said, let's try it. Again, an unusual twist. So my college career and now my professional career has got a few unusual twists involved. In fact, a customer said when I had heard they had hired their controller to become vice president of sales, I thought they had lost their mind. But he said, now I'm making sense of it. So that's what we did, and that was the greatest job I had ever had. I loved interacting with the customers, loved trying to understand what it is that made them tick and keep them awake, and got to the point where, okay, this is a very small paper company, maybe time to think about a larger paper company, and ended up moving from Fox River to a company called Crown Vantage, which was in the high volume commodity coated paper business, and was their senior vice president of publication papers, and worked in that for 5 years. I told them as I was in the interview process, their balance sheet looked to me to be in troubled condition. They were a spin-off from a company called Fort James. So it was as tough as we thought it would be, and they did a restructuring. And at that point, I hung out my shingle again, left Crown Vantage, started doing consulting, and ended up consulting for a merchant distribution company. And that was in Southern California, called Spicer's Paper. We were west of the Mississippi. Another regional merchant called Lindenmeyer Monroe was really the largest independent east of the Mississippi River. And I was president of Spicer's Paper for 7 years, and again, love every day of that. Ultimately, guess what happened? Lindenmeyer Monroe purchased Spicer's Paper. And if you track the top 5 customers along that entire journey, Taylor Corporation was on that list. And so the minute the announcement was made that Lindenmeyer was buying Spicer's, I got a call from Glen Taylor, and he said, how about you come to Mankato and let's talk. And came to Mankato, sat in the founder's room. He comes in, the first thing he says is, I don't have a job for you, but are you okay with that? And I said, I'm absolutely okay with that. Let's talk. And we engaged in just a terrific conversation, as you might expect. And Taylor was a company that had grown through acquisition, and Glen's philosophy really was, I want to make acquisitions where the brand stays alive, the management team is a part of it, and that strategy works great until you get to about the 85th acquisition. And then you've got to start putting them together in a different way, and that really was my role. So ultimately reported to him on day one. When he promoted his niece, Deb Taylor, to CEO, I reported to Deb. And then when he decided to make a leadership change in 2019, he asked me to help him reimagine the operating model of Taylor Corporation, and that launched the introduction of Taylor United, and here we are. And you know, it's been a terrific journey, but if you ask me what are the 2 or 3 things I'll never forget and really have a spot in my heart and my mind that will never dim, it's my first day on the job with Taylor. And I was due to report to Bob, a gentleman by the name of Bob Anderson. And it was on day one that Glen decided, no, you're going to report to me. Sorry, Bob. So devastation number one is I'm no longer going to report to Bob, and Bob did all the work of the day-to-day recruiting. And number two, I took responsibility for a few of the businesses that was also not previously announced. And so I didn't make too many friends on day one, but I did expand and deepen my relationship with Glen, and that's what I'll cherish the most. And I'll tell you a little story about the first session in his office. And you know, I have a unique relationship with Lance van der Zanden, and Lance and I have been together for 27 years. And when Bob was recruiting me, I didn't want there to be any mystery about my personal life. I knew there wasn't any mystery about my professional life. So I told Bob the situation, and he appreciated me telling him and said, don't worry about it, not a problem. Well, now, on day one, I'm reporting to Glen Taylor. And so as he started to explain what he's got in mind for me, I'm obsessed with saying, I told Bob for a reason. I've got to tell Mr. Taylor what the situation is. And so when he finished explaining what the job would be, I said, now, before you get too involved or kick me out the door and tell me to get going, I need to tell you something. And I had previously told Bob this, but I have a relationship, and it's been a long-term one. Gave him the name, and he looked me right in the eye and he said, you probably think I have a problem with that. And I said, well, I don't know if you have a problem with that, but I do know I wasn't going to leave your office and get to work without telling you. And believe me, if you do have a problem with that, we can solve it right now, and you know, no hard feelings. And he said, I'll tell you one thing. I have a reputation for being a conservative Republican. He said, but I am financially conservative, socially liberal, and I have no problem with it. In fact, does Lance want a job? So then I knew I was over that drama, and he went on to say, and you can both come to our church. We're an open and accepting church, and you just felt like you were a part of the company and certainly a part of the ownership family. And I had been in the building for 3 hours, you know, so that's the magic of Taylor. That's what has existed every day since, and it's just why I'm so proud to be a part of this company. Well, Lance is just a terrific partner. 27 years doesn't happen by accident. The real appreciation and the unknown going into this thing was, were we going to grow together? And we have grown together, and it's a remarkable relationship, and he is a partner to me in my job, and hopefully I can give him some thoughts on his more creative job, but together we're just a great team and have similar interests and enjoy each other's company immensely. The small condo we lived in Long Beach, California, we still own. I thought, if we need a safety hatch and get out west, let's have a place to go. And that has worked like a charm. So holidays, we go out there, any space in between that we can find a long weekend, we go out there. It's instead of walking through Mankato, now you're walking on the Strand facing the Pacific Ocean. So that's a real battery charger for sure. Lance and I love to do things together. We're constantly walking together. That's both cathartic from a health standpoint, but also a quiet time to chat. And for both of those reasons, we really enjoy those walking sessions. And I also love to exercise on my own, so I'm a runner, a sports enthusiast, so occupy a fair bit of time both watching and playing golf and enjoying the rare and beautiful summers in Minnesota. Hobbies are something that I worry a little bit when retirement ultimately comes around. I'm gonna need to have a plan. Just like we have a plan for Taylor, I'm gonna need to have a plan for retirement. Right now it's far enough off so I could worry about that on another day, but that's one of the things that keeps me awake at night is, oh my goodness, I don't want to wake up one day and say, what in the world am I gonna do with myself? When you look at it from 10,000 feet, I jumped into Arthur Andersen as a public accountant, but was specializing in the paper and packaging business. I had many paper and packaging clients, and that trail went almost down the supply chain. First from manufacturing paper, then from specialty papers to large volume papers, then the actual merchanting of those papers, to now putting ink on those papers. So there is a track there that seems to make logical sense. None of it pre-planned, and all of it fortunate as you put it together. Because when I think about my current job, and I say, why is it that I'm enjoying this job so much? Part of the answer is because of the diverse experiences that I've had with multiple companies and multiple ownership structure. Spicer's was publicly traded on the Australian Stock Exchange. Crown Vantage, a spin-off, ultimately a private equity company. And so privately owned Fox River Paper Company, privately owned Taylor Company. You know, that's the beauty of the career, is it just gave you so many new and different experiences that almost nothing crosses your desk that you haven't in one way, shape, or form seen before. You know, one of the things that I really am enjoying now is planning for the future with Glen, planning today with him for the ultimate day at which he steps away from the business. And he is very mindful of that. He wants it to be a smooth transition, part of our Taylor journey. Let the legacy live on. And but what I enjoy the most about it is not the structure that it's going to take or how it'll be governed, but the fact that Glen is a part of the next generation of Taylor. That is very special. That is a unique experience for me. It has also been a terrific learning experience as to how you think about the next chapter. And I think it means great things for Taylor.